My name is Stuart McLean and I'm the officer in charge of our Prosecution Services branch. Today we have temporarily withdrawn from operation Lidar speed detection lasers due to a legal issue associated with court prosecutions. This decision has nothing to do with the reliability or the accuracy of Lidar speed detection devices. However, as a result of a Supreme Court judgment earlier this year, we are no longer able to rely upon evidentiary aids in relation to these matters. In making this decision, we have explored various options to prosecute these matters without relying upon the evidentiary certificates. However, this has proven to be more problematic and complex than we initially anticipated. Having come to that conclusion, we have now decided the most appropriate course of action is to remove the Lidar speed detection lasers from operational use. South Australia Police have absolute confidence in the reliability and the accuracy of the Lidar speed detection devices, and they will be returned to operational use once the legislative issue has been addressed. Speeding continues to be a primary cause of road trauma in South Australia, and we are committed to ensuring our roads are as safe as they can be for all of us. Consequently, police will continue to be deployed to areas where we know speeding is a contributing factor to road trauma, and police will have at their disposal radar and speed camera devices.
Can you clarify what is the legal stumbling block that you're coming up against again and again in court?
Sure. So we have the ability of using a certificate in court to satisfy the court that the various evidentiary requirements for the device can be proven. This has become problematic because the legislation in South Australia has not kept pace with changes in technology. The legislation that we have been relying upon was written at a time for speedometers and stopwatches, and until recently we've been confident that this satisfied the requirement. However, as a result of the most recent judgment, we are now satisfied that is not the case. We've attempted to prosecute these matters without using certificates. That has become more problematic than we appreciated at first. So we're now seeking for legislative change to bring the law into line with contemporary technology.
Is this specifically around daily testing?
What it is actually to prove to the court that the device itself is accurate. Our Lidar speed detection devices are calibrated annually in accordance with manufacturers' specifications and the Australian standards. So these devices are tested every year. Then the police officers do a field test on the device twice a day. So at the commencement of the shift and at the end of the shift, the device is tested for accuracy. And only if that comes back positive on both tests in the one day that the device will use. And it's a combination of the annual calibration process and the testing done by the police officer on the day in accordance with the manufacturer's specification gives us confidence that the device is accurate. Now, we've been able to use evidentiary certificates in court to prove that. However, the Supreme Court judgment has now made it perfectly clear that the way the legislation is worded, we can no longer rely upon those. So this issue is associated with the wording of the legislation and the way the certificate is used, as opposed to the accuracy of the device.
What's your message to people who've already paid fines under the legislation over the last 12 months, maybe even further? Is it a case of tough luck?
We invite anyone who feels they've been affected by this decision to write to us. In the release, we've given an email address that's been set up for this very purpose, and we encourage them to write to us and we'll assess each matter on its merits.
But it says people who haven't paid yet.
Beg your pardon?
It says people who haven't yet paid their fine can apply. So people that have paid can also...
We invite anyone who believes they've been affected by it to write to us.
Just how many fines do you think have been issued over the years using these devices?
I don't know.
Is it thousands, tens of thousands?
I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive answer in relation to that.
How many years have they been used?
There's about 190 Lidar devices in use throughout the state. They're deployed to various locations.
Going back to when have they been used?
I don't know.
Is there another brand? Sorry, is there another brand of handheld devices?
Yeah, we use different devices for different locations. So we have radar and we have laser. And the laser devices, there's a couple of models in operation currently. Collectively, we refer to them as Lidar. This issue relates to the Lidar speed detection laser. It does not have any impact upon handheld radar guns, nor does it have any effect upon other radar devices.
So there could be fines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars going back over a number of years that could be called into question.
Yeah, I don't know. My concern in relation to this is road safety and how we actually use these devices to ensure that our roads are safe and how we successfully prosecute these matters through the court. Those issues aren't my concern.
This issue was identified interstate, months ago. Why was it not? Why did it continue on on in South Australia when it was clear that there was an issue?
I'm not familiar with the interstate example, and the different jurisdictions will have different approaches to this. It would have to do with the way legislation is written in each state and case law in each state. So I'm not familiar with the interstate example, and how matters play out interstate is difficult to extrapolate that into the South Australian context.
But didn't you know months ago, some time ago, that there was an issue here, but it kept on in South Australia?
The issue came to light to us in the judgments in July of this year. When that judgment was handed down, it became clear that the certificates in their current form couldn't be used, and we stopped using them at that time. We did seek to prosecute these matters without relying upon the certificates, but that proved to be overly complex and problematic for us to do. And so pursuing legislative reform, I think, is a solution.
So were you saying between July and now they have not been used?
The devices have been used, but the certificates have not been used since July, no.
And does that mean that fines have still been handed out between July and now?
Yeah, the devices have been in use since that time, and we were confident that we have the ability to successfully prosecute those matters by calling a series of expert witnesses. We were pursuing that through the court. It has become more complex and problematic than we anticipated, and now that we've made a decision not to proceed with those prosecutions, we've made the same decision to withdraw the Lidar devices from operational use.
So you were happy for people to be fined, knowing that if they sought to question that in the courts, it would be overturned?
At that point, we had every confidence that we could actually prosecute these matters by calling various witnesses.
But the court had said you could?
No, the court said that we couldn't use the certificate. The court ruled that the certificate, we couldn't prove that, and the certificate itself was invalid, so we stopped using it. The option was there to actually prosecute these matters by calling a series of witnesses. We went down that particular path. It proved to be problematic. We are still pursuing that as an option, but once we realised that we weren't in a position to call the witnesses that we would require, that's when the decision was made.
Okay, so if you find somebody and you knew that you didn't have any witnesses to call, you wouldn't have gone ahead with the fine, it would have been scrapped?
Well, that's why we've drawn the device from operational use now.
But were you scrapping fines when you knew that you couldn't call a witness to back it up in lieu of the certificate?
No, the decision that we have made to discontinue the prosecutions because we didn't believe there was a reasonable prospect of conviction is when we're satisfied we're unable to actually call the relevant witnesses to court. We'll continue to pursue that process and to identify suitable witnesses to satisfy the evidence. Once it became clear that we were unable to do that because it's particularly problematic, securing these witnesses, that's when the decision is made to discontinue the use of the device operationally.
But it doesn't look like these speed handguns.
One of us, please.
Was it only problematic when somebody was trying to challenge the fine?
Well, the issues associated with proving the evidence in court. So someone is issued an expiation notice when they're detected speeding, then have the option of contesting that and having the matter prosecuted in court. We step through a process of assessing that, whether we believe there's a reasonable prospect of conviction. And after the judgment mid-year, we were working towards calling expert witnesses. Now, some of these people may in fact be overseas, and we do need to weigh up their availability, their ability to build together the evidentiary package for this. And we've come to the conclusion now that it's just not viable, it is problematic, and that's why we've decided to discontinue those prosecutions and associated with that, make a decision to discontinue the use of the device operationally.
It doesn't look like these radars, or the handguns rather, will be out of action for very long though. This legislation could be in as early as Tuesday.
Depending when the legislation changes, I will not be satisfied to reuse or to operationally put the LiDARs back into use until I'm satisfied that we're in a position to satisfactorily prosecute one of those matters. We'll wait to see what happens with the legislative reform, and if the law is changed in relation to the evidentiary certificates, then we'll assess when an appropriate time is to return the devices to operational use.
I know you say the devices are accurate, but there would be people whose livelihoods have been completely disrupted by going through the courts and these sorts of prosecutions. So what's your message to them?
Well, we have absolute confidence in the reliability of the device and the important role they play in relation to our road safety campaign, our road safety message. But anyone who believes they've been affected by this issue and affected by this decision, they're invited to contact us, and the most efficient way of doing that is on the email address we've provided.
And who would be able to tell us in SAPOL how many people are affected, and can they tell us by the end of the day?
I don't know. I would imagine no.
Just lastly, how are people to know whether they were pinged by a laser or a radar? You're telling people to come forward who think they were pinged by a laser. What's the difference?
Okay, it'll be difficult for the individual to be aware of that, I accept that. We are talking here about handheld laser devices where the person was stopped by a police officer at the time. They would have had a conversation with the police officer and the police officer would have issued them with an expiation notice. So this is not a matter which was through a speed camera where they received a notice through the actual through the post. So it's one where they've been stopped by a police officer. That could have been a radar, which is not affected by this, but they've had a conversation with the police officer at the time.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Bill.